Nothing mattered more to the old alchemists than fire, and nothing terrified them more either. Every single stage of their long and difficult work depended on heat, applied with extraordinary care in exact and often mysterious proportions. Over furnaces they tended day and night for weeks or months at a stretch. Too little fire and the raw material would simply sit inert, refusing to change at all. Too much fire and it would be destroyed outright, burned to a useless ash with no hope of ever becoming the treasure the alchemist was seeking. The entire art, in a very real sense, came down to the patient and skillful management of this single dangerous element, and the old texts are full of warnings about how easily a careless or impatient worker could ruin years of labor with one poorly judged increase of the flame. Carl Jung read hundreds of these warnings about fire, and he came to see them as something far more significant than practical laboratory advice. He believed the alchemists, without fully realizing it themselves, were describing one of the most important and most dangerous forces at work inside the human psyche, a kind of inner heat that every person carries and that every person must learn, sooner or later, to work with skillfully or else suffer the consequences of mishandling it. This inner fire shows itself in many forms. It is the burning intensity of a genuine passion, the heat of a real conviction, the consuming energy of a creative obsession, the fierce and sometimes frightening force of anger, desire, or ambition. Whatever specific shape it takes, it is recognizable by one particular quality, an intensity that feels larger than the ordinary calm operations of daily thought, something that genuinely burns rather than simply thinking things through in a cool and orderly fashion. The old alchemists insisted that this fire was absolutely necessary. Without it, nothing in their work could ever change. A substance left cold and untouched simply remains exactly what it always was, forever, no matter how long you wait or how carefully you observe it. Jung saw the same principle at work in psychological life. A person who lives their entire existence at a comfortable emotional temperature, never really passionate about anything, never truly angered or moved or consumed by any deep desire, rarely undergoes any genuine transformation either. Real change in a human life, Jung observed again and again in his clinical practice, almost always requires some degree of this burning intensity, some genuine heat of feeling strong enough to actually melt down the old rigid patterns that calm, cool reasoning alone could never budge. The person who finally leaves a destructive situation, who finally breaks an old habit, who finally commits to a difficult and necessary path, is very rarely moved by calm calculation alone. Something in them has to catch fire first. And yet the alchemists were equally insistent that this same fire, mismanaged, could destroy everything just as easily as it could transform it. The texts are full of cautionary accounts of workers who let their furnace burn too hot, too fast, consumed by their own impatience or their own greed for a quick result, only to find their precious material reduced to worthless ash overnight. Jung recognized this danger too, and he saw it play out constantly in the lives of people who let their own inner fire burn completely out of control. The same passionate intensity that can fuel a genuine transformation can just as easily become an obsession that consumes a person's health, their relationships, and their sense of proportion, burning through everything valuable in its path with the same indiscriminate hunger that an unchecked laboratory fire shows toward whatever happens to be sitting in the furnace. Anger, left completely unchecked, becomes rage that destroys the very relationships it was originally trying to protect. Ambition, left completely unchecked, becomes an all-consuming hunger that burns to health, friendship, and peace of mind in pursuit of a goal that somehow never feels like quite enough once it is finally reached. The genuine skill the old alchemists spent their entire careers developing was not how to eliminate the fire, and it was certainly not how to avoid it altogether by keeping everything permanently cool and controlled. Both of those approaches, they knew from bitter experience, led to failure just as surely as an uncontrolled blaze did. The real skill was learning the exact and patient art of tending the flame, raising it slowly and gradually rather than all at once, watching the material constantly for signs that the heat needed to be adjusted, and above all resisting the very natural but very dangerous temptation to force the process faster than its own proper rhythm actually allowed. This patient, attentive relationship with fire, neither extinguishing it out of fear nor letting it rage out of impatience, is exactly the same skill Jung believed every person needed to develop toward their own inner passions and intensities. Consider your own relationship with the fire inside you, whatever particular form it happens to take in your own life. Do you tend to extinguish your own passionate feelings almost as soon as they arise, afraid of where genuine intensity might lead you, choosing the safety of permanent coolness over the risk of ever really burning for anything? This is its own kind of failure according to the old alchemical wisdom, because a substance that never burns at all never transforms either, no matter how carefully and safely it is preserved in its cold and unchanged state. Or do you tend to let your fire rage completely unchecked whenever it flares up, following every intense feeling wherever it happens to lead without any patient attention to whether the heat has grown dangerously excessive, burning through relationships, health, or opportunities in pursuit of whatever has currently captured your consuming interest? This too is its own kind of failure, producing not the treasure the alchemist sought, but only ash and ruin where something valuable used to be. There is a particular detail in the old texts that Jung found especially instructive. The most skilled alchemists did not simply set their furnace to a single fixed temperature and leave it running unattended for the entire process. They adjusted the heat constantly, in careful stages, sometimes raising it, sometimes lowering it, sometimes letting the material rest at a gentle warmth for a long period before finally applying a more intense and concentrated heat at exactly the right later moment. This suggests something important about how a person might actually learn to work with their own inner fire over the course of a real life. It is not a single decision made once, choosing either permanent coolness or permanent blazing intensity as your fixed and unchanging approach to everything. It is an ongoing, attentive practice, learning through real experience when a situation calls for the patient warmth of gentle persistence, and when it genuinely calls for the full and concentrated heat of your deepest passion and conviction, and developing, slowly and sometimes through painful trial and error, the wisdom to actually tell the difference. Think honestly about where the fire in your own life currently sits. Has it gone cold in some area where real transformation is actually needed? Some situation you keep approaching with careful, safe, unchanging coolness, when what is actually required is the courage to let yourself genuinely burn for it? Or has it been raging unchecked in some other area, consuming far more than it should, demanding the kind of patient tending that would allow it to actually transform something rather than simply reducing it to ash? If you can identify a place in your own life where your inner fire currently feels either too cold or dangerously unchecked, write below the single word for what that fire is actually about. Naming it honestly is often the first step toward the patient art of tending it wisely, the very skill the old alchemists spent their entire lives trying to master. Because the furnace those old workers guarded so carefully through countless sleepless nights was never really about turning ordinary metal into gold. It was a picture of the oldest and most dangerous gift the human soul has ever been given, a fire capable of destroying everything it touches or transforming it entirely, depending only on how patiently and how wisely it is finally learned to be tended.